Well, hey, Gold Creek Monroe, how we doing this morning? Y'all looking great, except for the Bears jersey, but otherwise, you guys are looking amazing. We love that. I'm sorry, you're getting called out so much today. It's not fair. Mike will buy you like a donut later. It'll be great. Man, hey, I'm Eric. I'm one of the pastors at Gold Creek. Part of my role gets to take me here and at Mill Creek and in between, and we always love it, our family, when we get to come and hang out with you guys. Our kids love it. Man, I tell you what, I love Mike. He is becoming one of my favorite people. Somebody described him to me this way this week. They said, Pastor Mike is like a boxer puppy that runs into a room, wags its tail, knocks over a lamp, and you just love him even more for it, right? And so, man, that's the truth. We love you, Mike. And as we get ready for this message today, you guys have some notes. We're going to go into that. And as I was preparing, I was doing a little bit of research and saw one of the least surprising articles I've ever seen. You know how it is, right? Everything is clickbait now, and they always try to make them really surprising and make you click on it. It could be like something so random, like you'll never believe what Tom Hanks orders from McDonald's, right? And you click on it, and it's not babies, it's just a Big Mac or something like that, right? And so you're like, that's not surprising at all. And so I saw one that wasn't surprising either, which was Seattle is one of the most stressed and burned out cities in the U.S. for work. We did it, guys. I mean, I know, come on, we were there. We're number 2 in the nation. And what kind of the study, if you look at it, is basically like everybody's just stressed out from work and life and all the things that we're juggling. And it kind of makes sense. There's this incredibly growing industry, the self-help industry. Right now, it's a $10 billion a year industry. Why? Because we're all stressed and we need help. And every single year, catch this, there are 15,000 new books written in the self-help category. Seems to me if any of them worked, we would stop writing so many books, right? You wouldn't need the 14,999 other ones. But we are all a little stressed. And part of that segment of that whole self-help category is this new thing about positive thinking, this positive thinking camp. And it's encapsulated by motivational speaker Brian Tracy, who said, change your thinking, change your life. And it sounds pretty good. It's like mostly true. If you can change the way you think in your mind and you can change your vocabulary and all those kinds of things, the internal narrative, then it's going to have this cascading effect and your life is going to be incredible. And it sounds too good to be true because it is. But what if there was an entirely new way of thinking? Something that doesn't just come from you. It doesn't come from somebody else. It comes from outside of you, from a greater source. And that's what we're going to look at today, is that God invites us into his thoughts. And we see this in Isaiah 55:8, where God says, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. We've been in this message series called The Road Back Home, and we've been walking through these verse by verse in Isaiah 55, and it's this section that invites wanderers to come back home to God. Specifically, it's this group of exiles, and God is promising to bring them back home, that he's going to go after them, the heart of God to go after lost people and bring them back in, because we all tend to drift, we get distracted, we wander. This 21 days of prayer and fasting, if you've been participating with us, that's one of the ways we refocus and reset our attention on God. But God's heart has always been to bring his people back home. And one of the ways that he does that is in our minds, by thinking God's thoughts, by bringing peace to our minds. And a good place to start in this conversation is to maybe address where we might be stuck. Like what's going wrong before we talk about how to make it right. And you'll see these in your notes, where my thought patterns might be stuck. And the first one, you might be in this category where you feel limited vulnerability because of past pain. You've walked through something too painful to even talk about yet. You don't want to talk about it. It feels like a fresh wound, and you don't expose fresh wounds, you protect them. And so you're not ready to deal with it yet. You're not ready to be vulnerable. Or maybe you were, and you reached out for help, and somebody threw it in your face, and so now it feels too dangerous to address that past pain. Maybe you'd be the second kind of category. You have that limited consistency or past indulgence. You've just kind of lived by impulse, and you've indulged in all that life has to offer on a really extreme level. We would call this addiction, where you became dependent on something or someone else because you had no discipline or consistency in your life, and now you're codependent, not independent. And that makes it tough. You get stuck in that pattern of life, and it feels impossible to overcome that. Or you might be in that third category, is limited impact, because you've experienced some past failure. You've tried before. You've given it a go. You've tried, but you've failed, and you don't want to put yourself at risk of failing again. It's that fear of failure, one of the most prevalent things we experience in our society today. We don't want to take a risk because failing would be worse than taking a risk against succeeding. It feels like too much. And to all of that, God responds with an offer of a better way, His way. His way of thinking that will get us unstuck and bring us back to the peace He designed us for. Together, we're going to walk through this, a playbook for peace in my mind this year. And if you were a fill-in-the-blanker, that first one is recognize self-imposed limitations. Man, we're all going to have some limitations that we feel in our life, but the self-imposed ones, those are the difficult ones. Those are the ones that only I have put on myself. It's only me that's doing that. In Isaiah 55:9, it says, as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Look, we all, whether you are a Christian here or not, you're an atheist, anywhere in between, we all have a tendency to measure God by our own standards. We measure God and we assume that He is like us, and that since I am fallible and I make mistakes, I'm imperfect, I change my mind, I can be difficult to please, no amens for that. We mistakenly assume that God is like us, that God must also be hard to please. He must also change His mind. He must also be. We tend to do that to God. And Isaiah directly challenges by saying, no, He's not like a person. He's not like a human being. He's not like us. He's higher. His actions, His thoughts, they're all higher than your thoughts. And it's not just His knowledge. Yes, His knowledge is higher than us. He knows everything there is to know. But it's more than that. It's about His capacity to even forgive and show mercy that is beyond our capacity to do so. We would look at God and He forgives an unforgivable person and say, how in the world could you do that? But it's because His thoughts are higher than ours. His mercy is greater than ours. Human beings, we hold grudges, but God's higher way is this radical pardon that He gives humanity that we cannot fathom. And to teach you a couple of theological terms today, there's this thing of God, this character and nature of God. He is both transcendent and He is imminent. And we as human beings live in between God's transcendence and His imminence. And you're like, I don't know what that means. Transcendence, to define it, means God is infinitely above us and He is not like us. That's what Isaiah is teaching us. God is transcendent. He is not like us. He is the creator and the sustainer of life. He spoke all of this into being. There's an argument, a famous argument from atheists that would say, well, can God create a rock so big that He Himself could not move it? And their counter is always, well, if God can't create it, He's not God. And if He can't lift it, He's not God either. But that assumes that God is part of His creation. But God is not part of His creation. He's not subject to the laws of physics. He's not subject and bound by time. He's outside of it. He's bigger than it. He created it. He's not subject to it. Every scientific discovery we've ever made, God already knows. He's never changes because He never finds a better way to do anything. Because He is this transcendent, all-powerful God, all-powerful, all-knowing. He's present everywhere. And that's great, but that makes Him seem really far away. But His imminence means that He is close. Imminence means that God is intimately present with us, and He's among us. So yes, God is transcendent. He's not like us. He's above everything, but He's chosen to make Himself available to us. That in one place, Jesus says He knows the very hairs on your head. He knows you deeply. He cares about you fully. He knows what's going on. He's deeply involved in what's going on in the world. And He cares about you, and He's always with you. To put it simply and maybe a little too bluntly, God is infinitely better than you are. And He is intimately available to you. God is the one who helps you break out of these self-imposed limitations. It's not the power of positive thinking. It is the presence and power of God in your life. The God who created the universe and has never been confused. You have access to God, and he's never been stressed. I can imagine some of us feel like we see the news, and we think God is up there like, man, humanity is running amok, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do about it. But no, God has never been stressed. He's always at peace. He always knows what to do, and you have access to that God. That's how we break out of those self-imposed limitations. So you might ask yourself today, what limitations have I put on myself that God has not placed on me? That somehow I've gotten this. If you've ever done any therapy, which, full disclosure, I've done a little bit because we're all messed up a little inside. And so one of the things that therapists will ask you is, well, who told you that? They'll you're like, oh, I can't do this, or you're thinking through this, and they'll say, who told you that? And you got to trace back, and you're like, well, I guess no one told me that. What limitations are you putting on yourself that no one's put on you? It sounds like this. It sounds like I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. Man, I feel like an imposter. It sounds like I've tried before and failed. It sounds like I'll never change. I heard the story once of a powerful adult elephant that was held in place and tied to a small stake in the ground by a thin rope that he obviously could have broken. And somebody asked the trainer, why doesn't the elephant set himself free? When you put the rope on, he just stays there. And the trainer responded and said, as a baby, the elephant did try to escape. We used the same rope and the same stake, and the elephant would pull against it, and it wasn't able to break free. So it came to the conclusion that it's impossible to break free. And even as an adult, even though it could, it doesn't even try. And I wonder how many of us that story might resonate. We're like that. We're tied to a past limitation that is no longer true in our lives. And you're saying, man, I can't because I've tried before and failed and I couldn't do it. And God is saying, no, you can because now I'm with you and my power is with you and I'm going to help you. And so we break out of those self-imposed limitations and let God work in our lives through those things. But what about when we face those external challenges, those things that you don't see coming, you can't plan for? There's just life. Number 2, approach setbacks as seasons of opportunity. I don't have to, probably not teaching you anything new here, but life is going to be filled with setbacks. Like, sorry to say, if you've lived any amount of time, you're going to face some setbacks. And if you haven't, it's imminent in your future. We all face these. And in Romans 5:3-5, the Apostle Paul addresses some of these feelings. And he says, not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not put us to shame. And so whether you follow Jesus or not, look, you're going to face some suffering and you're going to face some setbacks, but how you deal with them will be very different. If you're an atheist, essentially suffering has no purpose. Suffering is a meaningless part of the chain of events and the survival of the fittest, so it's something to avoid at all costs. If you come from more of an Eastern mindset, you might think of karma. Suffering is payback in that sense for past mistakes, and you've just got to endure it and do better the next time. But in Christianity, it's different. It's that Jesus can bring purpose out of suffering. That Jesus can actually refine you through suffering. There is actually purpose. It's not because you screwed up. And Paul, who wrote Romans, was addressing Christians who are facing like very severe and very tangible persecution. They're being killed and arrested because they believe the gospel. And it's easy to start believing that that's a sign God is punishing you. Now, to be clear, sometimes you do make mistakes and you do suffer the consequences for it. We talk with people and you're like, man, you are not being persecuted. You stole money from your job. It's not the same thing, right? But sometimes you're doing the right thing, you're doing well, and still you're like, man, I don't understand. Like, it's still hard. It's still difficult. And this is what Paul is addressing. He says, Paul is saying, hey, it's not true that simply suffering means you're being punished. It might be that God is working something in you. What if God isn't punishing you, but he's allowing you to go through something difficult in order to build you up, in order to strengthen you? Look, we all avoid suffering at all costs, but it is the thing that builds character in our lives. It is the thing that builds perseverance in our lives. It may be the only thing that makes us truly grow. I don't know any person in life who's fully mature, living a great life, who hasn't walked through suffering and difficulty and overcome it. That's what builds character in us. Now, look, back in 2020, we all had our own versions of suffering. Maybe you've blacked out that period of life, in your mind. But for me, there was a really unique one that came up, which was nothing related to the whole virus and shutdown. It was that I started having this really severe lower back pain. And I couldn't do just like basic stuff, like playing with the kids. It was excruciating, and doing the dishes was painful. And man, even sleeping was painful. I tell you what, you are in a different era of life if sleeping can injure you. Right, and so I'm like waking up, like, oh my gosh, my life is over. And so I go to the doctor and I try to figure this out. They do all the imaging and stuff like that and find out I have a lipoma, which is just like a little extra fat in a little specific spot. It's like, well, like, it's in the spot. Let's take it out and see what happens. I was like, yes, take out all the fat you can. That's fine. And so he gives me some pain meds. That's a doctor for you. He's like, I'm going to cut you open and give you pain meds. And like, let's see if it works. And so I have the surgery, but it didn't fix anything. So now I've just got a scar and pain over the same place. So I saw a chiropractor and figured out that, I was actually kind of twisted up. I was out of alignment and I was like pinched over, and it was pinching this specific part of my lower back, and got adjusted and went through weeks of that treatment, and it fully recovered. I got back to 100%, got back to my normal life again. And yeah, I had to start doing dishes again. It was kind of a bummer, but I got better. And all that produced some perseverance in my life. Because you've got to keep seeking the answer. You got to keep showing up for the treatment. You got to keep doing the stuff. So what is it that God might be refining in you right now that you can't see the end of yet? And the painful truth is that God will let you endure difficulties in order to grow you, in order to become the person that He's created you to be, in order to produce character and hope in you. Because if you've never walked through difficulty and seen God come through, then how do you know how powerful He is? How do you know how good He is? How do you know how sustaining He is? You'd just be an entitled kind of kid. All of us who are parents, there is a point in our lives where we as parents have to let our kids struggle a little bit. Right? When our kids are learning how to walk, you don't hold them every single time. You have to let them fall. You have to let them build the strength. God, your Father, does the same in our lives. He lets you endure it. But look, He walks alongside you in it as well. He doesn't make you do it alone. He's with you through it. He sustains you in it, and He's through it. And it's not permanent. God will bring an end to it. And so our choice is really rather to receive it or to resist it. If we resist it, it's us fighting against God and going, God, I just don't want any suffering in my life. I don't want this work in my life. I'm just going to fight against it. And I've met people through years of ministry who get stuck in one painful moment of their life because they never learned anything from it. They got stuck there. That's the defining moment of their life, and they never moved on. And so instead we receive it and we go, God, I don't understand what this is or why it's happening, but God, if you have something to teach me in it, teach me in it. Look, earthly suffering is not an eternal reality. We're after the eternal reality. So when you face a setback, man, first thing, ask God to remove it. Of course. And if He doesn't, then ask Him, God, what are you trying to teach me in this setback? What is the opportunity here? So we allow God into our setbacks and know that it's not the end of your story either. The third point today is to trust that God has a good plan. You can trust that God has a good plan. God is at work in your life. If He's producing character in you, if He's producing perseverance in you, it's going to serve a purpose and it's going to serve a good plan. One of my favorite verses in Romans 8:28, it says, and we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love Him, who've been called according to His purpose. And so the same Paul who says glory in sufferings also says God has a good plan. There is good on the end of it. This is the promise on the other end of the setback. If you let God do His work and you trust Him and you don't abandon ship, God is going to work good in your life. He doesn't make bad things happen to you, but He can take anything bad done to you and turn it around for good. Most of us, we live our lives in between the tension of something bad that's happened and waiting for God to turn it around for good. And what's that going to mean? What's happened, and then God's going to turn around. And when you're going through it, this is one of those verses. I think this is one of those Hobby Lobby verses, right? You put it up on your wall, and you're like, I'm going to look at that every day and believe that it's true until I see it to be true. Now, apparently, I look a lot like a pastor who used to be here at Gold Creek. And I've heard this. I've actually had like entire conversations with people who thought I was somebody else. And at the end of it, they realized, you are not the person I thought you were. And I'm fine with that. That's okay. I can be mistaken for somebody else. Problem came when people started using comparative statements between the two of us. So our lead pastor, Nick, once described me as, he looks like Brian, but with less muscles. And that felt unnecessary, that last part. If last week I was in Mill Creek and serving there, and somebody in the lobby saw me and saw me from afar and was like, hey, we're going to talk afterwards. We're going to talk. And I've never seen this person before in my life. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, I have a stalker. I don't know what's happening. He thought I was obviously Brian. And he comes back after service and goes, man, I'm so sorry. I thought you were Brian. And then I thought, man, he got really skinny. And I was like, again, unnecessary. So I was going to prove all of these people wrong. And so I started hitting the gym. And you know how I told you I fixed my back? I went too hard and I hurt my back again. So again, aging is just a great thing. And so I went back to the chiropractor. I obviously knew some of the stuff that I needed to do and kind of got that readjustment, got things reworked. But this chiropractor taught me something else. He said, look, I can fix the spinal issues. That's great. But what you need is more core strength to support your spine. And somehow it all came back to me being too skinny again, like full circle. And so since then, got fixed up again. I've been consistent in the gym. I know you can't see it, but there are more muscles than there used to be in there, and there's a six-pack hiding inside there somewhere. But from the pain, there came some good. I'm better for it now because of the patterns and the consistency that it built in my life. Something good can come out of the pain. So how is God inviting you to trust his plan? How is God working a plan for your good? What is it that God can do in your life? Your pain might be a lot deeper than my back pain. It might feel like life is out of control, but God is still in control. He's still working. His promise is still true. And he can make good out of even the worst of circumstances. There's a story in Genesis of a man named Joseph, and Joseph was hated by his brothers. In fact, they hated him so much that they sold him into slavery, and he became a slave in Egypt, and he served for years as a slave in one household. He was accused of doing wrong and was sent into prison for a few more years, and it's like, God has forgotten me, life is over. And then this opportunity came where Pharaoh had this dream no one could interpret, and somebody remembered that Joseph could interpret dreams, and so long story short, Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dream, and he goes from being in prison to number 2 in charge of all of Egypt. And really what he's doing is saving people from a famine. It was a warning that there's a famine coming, and we need to prepare. And Egypt is the one nation on earth that prepares because of Joseph's intervention. And then this moment happens where Joseph's brothers come to buy grain from him, but they don't recognize him anymore. And it's one of those moments where you're like, he's going to get even. What's going to happen? Instead of getting even, he said this in Genesis 50:20. He said, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Man, if God can do it in Joseph's story, if God can do it because somebody out of slavery, God can do it for you as well. He can do anything with you. And when you trust God's good plan, then that's where you find that deeper place of peace, even before it comes. And so number 4, let a posture of peace lead my life. This is a place that we all want to live in. We all want to be in that place where, man, my life is marked by peace, not chaos. My life is marked by peace, not by fear. In Isaiah 55:12, God once again speaks to his people and says, you will go out in joy and be led forth in peace. The promise in all of this is that when you align your thinking with God's, he will lead you to joy and to peace. And notice that it's not something that you do for yourself. It's not something that you do. It's something that you are led in. You are led forth in peace. Somebody is leading you into that peace, into that place. That when you remove those self-imposed limitations and approach those setbacks as opportunities and learn to trust that God has a good plan, you find that posture of peace that carries you on in any and all circumstances. And all that produces such a mindset shift in you that no matter what you're walking through, you're like, man, you can go like, I'm actually at peace. I'm actually at peace with this situation. It's not good, but I have peace. So many of us, we believe peace is the absence of problems, but biblically, peace is the presence of God in the problem. That he can actually grant you peace in whatever you're walking through. He can lead you in joy in whatever you're walking through, not after things turn out for good, but even before they do. And what's the source of that joy and that peace? St. Augustine, he said it this way. He says, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you." That peace, it's not a clever tool. It's not the power of positive thinking. It's a person. It's Jesus in your life. And that's why 2,000 years ago, God stepped into human history in the person of Jesus. Not to condemn the world, but to save the world. He lived a perfect life, the only one to ever do so. He was betrayed and killed on a cross. And 3 days later, he rose again from the dead so that anyone, and that includes you, who calls on his name would be saved. That's how we find peace in our lives, is that we trust in Jesus. We believe that he is who he says he is, that he has a good plan for our lives, and if he died for us, he loves us enough and knows us, and can make a difference. So today, the best thing you can do is to find that joy and that peace in him. So all across, I want to ask you just to bow your head and close your eyes with me just for a moment. Some of you are followers of Jesus, but you're not experiencing peace right now in your life. You've only seen the limitations. You might just see setbacks, and you don't see God's plan, and you certainly don't see good coming out of it yet. Maybe you've even tried to participate in 21 days of prayer and fasting, and it's not like things are going well. You need to think God's higher thoughts and experience his peace. And if that's you today, just no one looking around or anything like, just you a moment with you and God. I want to pray for you, but I want to know who I'm praying for. So if that's you and you're saying, man, I need some of that peace in my life, God. Would you just slip up a hand, just real simple, real easy to respond. Say, that's me. I could use some of that peace. Yeah, I see that. Anybody else? Man, I just could use some of that peace. I see that. I see that. So many hands across the place. Let me pray for you, Jesus. I pray for everyone. These people who've called on your name, they've found you, Jesus, and yet they're not experiencing peace, God. God, I pray that you'd search their hearts, search their minds, Lord, and I pray that you'd replace those anxious thoughts with your good thoughts, Lord. I pray that you would speak into their lives and they would know, God, that they have a Savior in you. And that, Jesus, that you would make a way in their lives for them to experience peace. And I pray even right now, God, through your supernatural presence, that they would experience peace in their minds like they haven't for weeks or months, God. In Jesus' name we ask. And with everyone just continuing to kind of remain in that posture of heads bowed and eyes closed. Some of you in this room, you haven't yet given your life to Jesus. You haven't crossed that line of faith. But today, as we've talked about this, maybe it was new for you to hear that God has a plan for your life. Maybe it was new for you to hear that Jesus died for you and loves you. Or maybe it just clicked for the first time ever that Jesus really is who he says he is and you really can trust him. And if that's you today and you're ready to follow him and surrender your life to him, I want to pray for you too. And I just ask you to do the same thing that those Christians earlier did before you. If that's you and you're saying, man, I'm ready to follow Jesus, would you just lift a hand as well? Just to let me know. I want to pray for you today. All across this place. I see that. Anyone else together today? Hey, I want to follow Jesus. I'm going in. I'm going to pray for you as well. Jesus, we thank you for those hands lifted. God, and those people who maybe didn't lift their hands, but they believe this and they're ready for this, God. Later on in Romans, Paul tells us if we believe in our hearts and confess with our mouths that Jesus is Lord and God raised him from the dead, then we will be saved. That's all it takes, Jesus. It's a gift that you freely offer us that we simply reach out and take. And so, Jesus, we believe you are who you say you are. You came and lived and died and rose again. And on that, we find our salvation, forgiveness for sins, and the peace that we so long for. And Jesus, I pray for every person in this place that we would experience that peace in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Okay, can we celebrate with those people that made that decision together today? Amazing. So good. Hey, would you stand with me across this place? We're going to respond in a slightly different way than usual. We're going to respond by receiving communion together. We practice an open communion. So, hey, if you are a follower of Jesus, you believe, maybe you just crossed the line of faith, you can participate in this with us. We're going to take a few moments while the band plays to come forward and grab the elements, take a juice and a piece of bread back to your seat, and we'll receive those together in just a few moments.